Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are coming to you live on December 30th, 2025. If any of you are an NLC webinar first timer, know that our Cathedra webinars get their name from the Creek word for learning. And today you're going to be learning an intro to NSPIRE from Crystal Banks-Mann, who's the training coordinator with Travoy. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also thrilled that you could tune in for the webinar with us today. If you could just follow along while I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law printed here. This is just a friendly reminder that the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. Moving forward, if you need to come back and revisit the recording or perhaps a PDF of the slides or any of our other webinars that we've hosted here on the platform, you can also you can find all of that in the courses section. I did put a link to the presentation slides for you in the chat, and I'm going to copy and paste that one more time for you. If you tune in for a webinar in the future, now that you're a member of the platform, you can just log in when we're having that webinar and you'll click on the green banner to join just like you did today. We do ask that you join with listen-only capabilities because we're recording the webinars, so it just helps to cut down on audio feedback in the recording. And if you joined and you found that your sound is coming out of the wrong device, maybe you're trying to use headphones, maybe you're trying to use a Bluetooth speaker, whatever the case might be, if you come down to the bottom of your screen, where I have a telephone icon, you might have a headset icon. But either way, if you click on that, it'll bring up a list of your speaker devices, and you can select the proper audio output. Even though we ask that you join with yourself muted, we do still, of course, want to encourage class participation. We are going to primarily rely on the public chat for this. We want to know your comments. We want to know your questions, any tech support issues that I could try to help you navigate through. If you don't yet have the public chat open, you can come over here to the messages panel and click on public chat. And that'll open up a chat that goes on between the instructor, you, the attendees, as well as me, the NLC staff. Just type whatever you want to say or ask into the box that says send message to public chat. And you can either hit enter or click on the paper airplane button, and that'll send it in where everyone can see it. We do have a list of helpful links for you in the shared notes section. You can find the link to the slides, the webinar feedback survey, along with a lot of other helpful links. And if you think that we maybe missed a question along the way, you can use the hand raise feature down at the bottom right to draw our attention to it. We'd love if you took a little time to use the public chat now to introduce yourselves. You could let us know your name, where you're tuning in from, your work or your role in Indian country. It maybe led you to the webinar. Maybe you're just here for personal information. And your tribal affiliation. You might just be a tribal employee and you don't have your own tribal affiliation. That is okay too. All are welcome. And then just a quick final note while you're introducing yourselves for us in the chat. Try your best to not click on this red menu panel that's all the way to the left-hand side of your screen. You might not have it expanded. Yours might just be the icons. But just know that if you click on it, it is going to pull you out of the webinar immediately. There won't be like a warning message or anything. You can always rejoin by clicking on that green banner once again, but I just don't want you to miss anything, so just in case. All right, folks, while you're introducing yourselves in the chat, it is with great pleasure that I introduce your webinar instructor, Crystal Banks-Mann. And Crystal, I have made you presenter now.
Great. Hello, everyone. I am seeing everybody introduce themselves. I see some familiar faces. Hi, Genevieve. Hi, Richard. Deborah. I want to just introduce myself a little bit. I know a lot of you, but my name is Crystal Banks-Mann. I'm the training coordinator for Travoy. And at Travoy, if you are not familiar with what we do, we help Indigenous nations to find financing for housing as well as economic development. And today we are talking about NSPIRE. This is the new inspection protocol that is going to be used by HUD and any other low-income forms of funding that you may have. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, or at the end, then we will have a question and answer session. So if you want to save it for then, that's fine. Otherwise, please feel free to drop it in there. Sometimes it's nice to just answer the question while we're in the moment. And Mindy, I did see your comment. And unfortunately, I don't believe that this platform has the capability to do closed captions. However, Brooke did inform me that when they post these on YouTube, so if you just go to the Native Learning Center YouTube, then you should be able to turn on closed captionings there. So I apologize. We're not really able to change what the platform can do, but that is something that I know that Native Learning Center is looking into. Okay. So we're going to talk about NSPIRE today. This is going to be a very short lesson. It's going to be a quick overview. This training can be a full 8-hour training, and that's one where we go through individually each and every deficiency. So if you are interested in that, then we will most likely be having some of those coming up next year. So in a couple of days, in 2026, we'll have a couple of those, but we also can come out on site and do on-site training. So if you are interested in that, then please let me know and we can get something set up. Okay, so let's talk about what NSPIRE means. First of all, it is an acronym, as with most words in the HUD world. It stands for the National Standards for the Physical Inspection of Real Estate. And this was something that came about in, actually almost like a decade ago. And the reason that it came about is because Congress actually got involved with HUD and noticed that there were a lot of different types of inspections that HUD conducted. So there was REAC inspections, there were UPCS inspections, HQS inspections, and really there's not a good reason for having all these different criteria, because something being suitable for occupancy should not depend on where the money is coming from. And so they wanted to align the standards across all of the funding sources and also eliminate any subjective criteria. So if any of you have had an inspection in the past and you had, one inspector who wrote you up on something and then another inspector didn't write you up on that, then that's usually what we call subjective criteria. And so the goal of NSPIRE is to eliminate that subjective criteria and just have a standard for all of the inspectors to use. It's also intended to alleviate clerical burdens for both staff and for your tenants. We also want to prioritize our tenants over property. Again, I'm sure you've had inspections before where you have gotten written up for something that is an aesthetic. So things like having overgrown, vegetation, or things like having graffiti. And those are things that are not necessarily nice to look at, and it is related to property, but it doesn't mean the tenants are not safe and enjoying their homes. They're also wanting to modernize our inspections and improve communication between, again, tenants and the housing authority or department and HUD or the state agency, depending on your funding source. So that's the goal of NSPIRE. It actually has been implemented for over 2 years now. It first went into effect on October 1st, 2023. All of our other inspection standards, such as UPCS, REAC, and HQS, have sunsetted as of that date. So they no longer exist. This implementation of NSPIRE was extended until October 1st, 2024. And there are some state agencies, if you have either home funds, HTF funds, or LIHTC funds, that they have actually given us a little bit more time to come into compliance. So it just depends on your state agency when it was fully implemented. But going forward, all of the agencies should have this fully implemented at this point. So there's some new framework that comes along with NSPIRE. They're going to have less emphasis on condition and appearance and more emphasis on the health and safety of the units. There's also some changes to our deficiency levels and our repair timeframes. So here are what the deficiency levels are now with NSPIRE. If you remember previously, if you've been doing inspections for a while, then you know that they used to have life-threatening, high one, low one, all different kinds of acronyms for it. And they have now done away with that. And there are just 4 deficiency levels. They are life-threatening, which is if there is a deficiency that's present, it would present a high risk of death or severe illness or injury to a resident. Severe is the next, and that is a deficiency that if it is present, then it could present a high risk of permanent disability or serious injury or illness to the resident, something that would require like an emergency room visit. Moderate deficiencies would be something that could present a moderate risk of an adverse health event, causing a healthcare visit, not necessarily emergency room visit. And then low is something that is still critical to habitability, but it's not presenting a substantive health or safety risk to your tenant. With those new deficiency levels comes new repair timeframes. And so if you've got a life-threatening or a severe deficiency, then you have 24 hours to repair that. If it is a moderate deficiency, you'll have 30 days to repair it. And low deficiencies, HUD says 60 days. However, I want to tell you that if your state agency has a more restrictive time frame on those low deficiencies, please, I'm going to defer to what they say. They are allowed to have more restrictive timeframes. They can't have less restrictive timeframes. And so the 60 days might not pertain to your particular state if you have LIHTC, HTF, or home funds. So our new inspectable areas, there formerly were 5 inspectable areas. Now there are just 3. They are inside, outside, and unit. When we say inside, then that means any common area that is on the interior of a building. So it could be a common area. It could be your office. It could be a laundry room. Anything that is inside that is not a unit. Outside refers to anything that's on the building site, any of its exterior components, things like sidewalks, parking lots, retaining walls. And then a unit is anything that is interior where the tenant actually lives. So when you are going to have your findings report, then they are going to break these down into these 3 sections. So whoever your inspector is, whether it is somebody from HUD, whether it is your investor, whether it is the state agency, whether it is you yourself, there are 3 areas that each deficiency will be lumped into. This is just a visual representation. I'm a visual person, and so I like to include as many visuals as I can. This is what it will look like based on where the inspector is standing when they notice the deficiency. So if they are standing outside on the grounds when they see a deficiency, such as litter, it's going to be recorded as an outside deficiency. If they're inside a tenant's unit, it'll be recorded as unit. And if they're in, let's say, the entryway, the lobby, a breezeway, then that will be an inside deficiency. So they've consolidated our 5 inspectable areas. They've also removed some non-health and safety items completely. Things that are no longer deficiencies are things like Overgrown vegetation, except in some cases, most of the time, if you have the tenant has not mowed their lawn in a while, or seen, if it's the middle of summer in Arizona, we might have some dying vegetation. Those are no longer going to be written up as deficiencies unless they are impeding something else. So if you had overgrown vegetation that was growing over the sidewalk, for example, and limiting somebody's ability to use the sidewalk, or overgrown vegetation that was obscuring an address, then those would be deficiencies. But just having longer than normal grass is not going to be a deficiency. Also, if there is any damage to a fence that is not a safety and security fence, then that will no longer be written up. Safety and security fences are things that would, keep people from injuring themselves, such as having a gate fence around a pool so that people do not, fall in and drown, or around a retaining wall along a steep drop off. So those are considered security fences. If it's not a security fence, it's just a perimeter fence, or it delineates, where the tenant's yard is, that is not considered security, and it should not have any deficiencies associated with it. Also, graffiti. Graffiti, like I said, is not necessarily something we want. So I'm not saying you have to allow them to have graffiti. Of course, we're still going to clean the graffiti off. I'm just saying that you are not going to be written up on it on an inspection if you have graffiti. And then the last one is mismatched paint. We see this a lot because, sometimes we have the houses painted and then they sit out in the sun for a little while, and then you have to do a patch on there. And no matter what, the color of paint is not going to match because it's been faded by the sun. We used to be written up on that all the time. We're no longer going to be able to get written up on that. So these are good things, items that are no longer deficiencies. They've also added something called deficiency rationales. This is something that describes the harm or the negative result of the deficiency. It has to provide clear and defensible explanation. It is based on sound science. So the 5 deficiency rationales that your deficiencies will be lumped into are health and safety. That's the biggest one. Function and operability. So is something functioning? The condition and appearance, and that doesn't mean, oh, it's pretty or it's not pretty. It means, does it look as though it could be failing? For example, if you had rust covering a water tank, then that looks like it would at some point give out and then would affect function and operability and could potentially be a health and safety issue. Our routine maintenance, and then also structural. So those are our 5 deficiency rationales. When you receive a report from the state or HUD, then they should be put into one of these 5 categories: why they wrote you up on something and what the clear and defensible explanation is. All right, so the last thing that has changed, this is our standards interpretations table. You can very easily find this on the HUD website, and it will actually list out all of the deficiencies. They're in alphabetical order, and they will show you what it applies to, if it's the unit, the inside, or the outside. And so if you just click on those, it'll take you straight to that deficiency and tell you exactly what it is. So if you ever have questions, let's say you just had an inspection and you're like, I got written up on something, I'm not sure if that's accurate, you can go, let's say, click on your carbon monoxide alarm standard, and you can see exactly what the requirements are for carbon monoxide detectors. Okay, now this is the last thing that's changed, and it's our NSPIRE scoring. If you have not previously been subject to a score, so this would be a REACT score, then you will not be subject to scoring in the future. This is only if your property falls into that category of requiring REACT. So the scoring has changed for that. The deficiencies are scored based on the severity and the location of them. They are weighed using a defect severity value, and then that will give the inspector a grade that they can give you. You are supposed to get your full scored inspection report within 15 days of the inspection and have 45 days to submit a request for a technical review for any issues or errors that you see. Now, this applies to HUD. This does not apply to the state housing agencies. Again, they can make their own rules on as far as the time frame. So please don't go back to your state agencies and say, well, Crystal said, because they don't care what I said. If they have their own rules, then they have their own rules. Now, the scoring is just like we are back in school, A, B, C, D, and it depends on what your score is, how frequently you will be inspected by HUD. So if you get an A, that's a 90 and above, then you'll be inspected every 3 years. A B would be between 80 and 89, and that would be every 2 years. A substandard grade would be a C or a D, and you would be inspected annually. And then if you've got an E or an F, that is a failing grade, and you could have higher inspection frequency. You could have them come out twice in a year, 3 times in a year, depending on how severe the issues are on the property. And the sample size is going to also pertain to how many units you have in your property. Now, I want to put a little asterisk by this because this is subject to change, and I have seen some state agencies who have they're just going with a straight 20%, but this is what the NSPIRE regs say, that it goes according to how many units you have in the property. So if you've got 1 unit, they're obviously going to inspect 1. If you've got 19 to 21 units, they're going to inspect 13 of them. If you have 1,000 units, they're only going to inspect 26 of them. So this is something that I think is still up in the air about whether or not they're going to continue with this or just stay with a straight 20%. So please just keep your ear out to see if there's any changes to this schedule. Also, we're going to try to modernize our inspections, and that is by using new technology that's available to us. This is something that HUD and your state agencies will be using, and I say if they're going to use it, we should probably use it as well. This first little device that you see, I'm sure a lot of you have those. They are GFCI testers. These are things that you can just stick right into your outlets, and there are 3 colors on there, 3 colored lights. Whatever lights up will correspond to whether it is properly grounded, if it is hot, if it's open, if it's not grounded. And that's a really quick and easy way for you to tell if your outlets are functioning and the GFCI protections are also working. There's some other devices, like we've got the little green thing with the little pointy top. That is a moisture meter. This is a great thing to use that can actually determine what the moisture levels are in a unit. This is very helpful for identifying if there are mold-like substances or mildew, just to determine if there is something in the air. You can also take those little pointy things and you can put it into the drywall, and it will measure the moisture level in there as well. There are temperature guns that are easy to use. It's kind of like a little laser pointer, and you point it at where the air is coming out, and it will tell you what the temperature of the air is. So you don't have to just use your hand and say, that feels hot or that feels cold. You can actually get an accurate reading on how cool the air is that's coming out. Also, the little silver thing with the stick on it, those are great for putting in the oven to make sure that an oven is heating properly. And then the last one is something that is optional and it cannot be used on its own. It can only be used with a moisture meter. And this is an infrared camera. So as you can see, it's got a little screen on there and you point that at the wall and it can actually look behind the wall and see if there's a leak. It'll tell you what the temperature is of the water. So you know if it is, from the hot water tank or if it's coming from cold water. And this is a really great device. So you're not required by any means to have any of these. It is just something that might make your life or the lives of your maintenance team a little bit easier. Okay, so the first category, if anybody has any other questions, I hope we got everybody's issues with sound figured out. But if you don't have any questions about what we just talked about, let's go into the actual details of all the deficiencies. So the first and biggest one is our fire safety. With our fire safety, they are implementing NFPA 72. That's the National Fire Protection Association bylaw 72. And they're also going to require carbon monoxide detectors. They used to be a recommendation, but they are now a requirement. And there are some more stringent and specific fire door requirements. So NFPA 72 is the preeminent national standard for smoke alarms, and it states that you must have at least one working smoke alarm installed on every level of the property. You also have to have at least one working smoke alarm installed outside of each sleeping room within 21 feet, as well as a working smoke alarm installed inside of the bedroom. As of 12/29/24, all smoke detectors, which are solely battery operated, that means they are not hardwired into the building's wiring system, they will have to have sealed tamper-proof batteries. If you have not seen those, then it looks just like a regular smoke alarm. However, there's no place for you to put a battery in or take a battery out. They're supposed to have 10-year batteries in them. And this is great because now your tenants can't take their batteries out of their smoke detectors because that's the main person who is doing that, right? I know that it's not you guys, it's not your maintenance team going in and stealing batteries. It's usually the tenant. They start beeping and the tenant takes them down. So if you have hardwired, then please ignore that. You don't have to, get new smoke alarms. But if they are not hardwired, then please make sure that you are replacing them with battery operated, sealed tamper-proof alarms. There's also some specific ways that you can place those smoke alarms. If it's ceiling mounted, it must be more than 4 inches away from the wall. If it's wall mounted, it cannot be closer than 4 inches or more than 12 inches from the ceiling. It should never be painted or have any stickers or decorations on them. So when you're painting your units, please make sure that they are taping off or taking them down so that they don't get any paint on there. You also cannot have them installed within 36 inches of windows, exterior doors, fans, or ducts where the draft could interfere with the operation of it. Also, we do not ever want to install those within 10 feet of a cooking appliance, and that is because we don't want them going off when there is not actually a fire. So, if you have smoke that's coming up from cooking, then that could make the alarm go off and it'd be a false alarm. So never closer than 10 feet from a cooking appliance. This is just another diagram to show where the best place to place the smoke alarm is. All right, carbon monoxide detectors are transitioning from what was previously a survey question, and they are now an enforceable standard. That is because the 2021 Consolidated Appropriations Act has included a statutory requirement for CO alarms to be installed. That is in accordance with 2018 International Fire Code. And chapters 9 and 11 of the IFC contain what the specific installation requirements are, and those are available online. This became effective December 27th, 2022. So this is something that you should have already been doing. If you haven't, that's okay. Just try to get yourself into compliance. You only have to have a carbon monoxide detector if there is fuel burning equipment or an attached private garage that's unventilated. So if you have fuel burning appliance, such as a water tank or a stove, if you have a forced air furnace or a fireplace, you are required to have a carbon monoxide detector. Also, if there is an attached unventilated private garage, so if it has a window, that is considered ventilated. If it is completely detached, then that is not considered an attached private garage. If you do have any of this fuel burning equipment, then you should install these in dwelling units outside of each sleeping area and in the immediate vicinity of a bedroom. If the fuel burning equipment is in the bedroom or an attached bathroom, then you do have to have that CO detector in the actual bedroom itself. If it's in an attic, we're going to treat it as a mechanical space. Also, our CO detectors should receive their primary power from the building's wiring with a battery backup, unless at the time of construction, code did not require CO detectors. There's no specific place that you have to install a CO alarm as far as, high up on the wall. So just follow whatever the manufacturer's specifications are. If you don't have those, best practice is at least 5 feet from the floor and not within 6 inches of a conjoining wall. If you have the dual one that is combined with a smoke alarm, then follow the smoke alarm placement and you will be in compliance for both of them. This is a decision tree for you because I love a good chart. And just determine if you are going to need to have a CO alarm, and if so, where you'll need to have that placed. Another visual representation, if you've got a multi-story unit or a single-story unit, where you should have these placed. Okay. If there are no questions about smoke alarms and CO alarms, then we will talk about fire doors. Fire doors are doors that are going to separate two areas and help prevent the spread of a fire. We typically don't see these in units. These are typically maybe between the garage and the unit or in common areas. Previously, these were listed with other doors. Now they have their own category. If you have a fire labeled door that is absent with evidence of prior installation, or it does not open, does not latch and close, it could pose a higher safety risk. They should also always have self-closing hardware and should never be propped open. That's the big one that I see, is that they are pretty regularly propped open with a little wedge or a rock. They should not be propped open. Fire extinguishers are not necessarily a requirement, but once they've been installed, they become a requirement. You can either have rechargeable fire extinguishers or disposable one-time use fire extinguishers. If they are rechargeable, they should be inspected by a qualified fire protection company annually. If it is a one-time use, you don't have to have them inspected, but you do have to replace them 12 years from the manufacturer's date. If the tenant brings their own fire extinguisher, then these should not be inspected. We never inspect the tenant's personal property. We want to make sure that they are accessible and visible and properly mounted. And the location requirements just depends on the type of fire extinguisher it is. This is a chart that shows the different kinds of fire extinguishers that are out there and where they should be installed. This is what the little gauge looks like on a fire extinguisher. As you can see, there's usually a little green piece of pie that says that it is full, that it is properly charged. And then if it is outside of that, then it means it either needs to be charged or it needs to be replaced. There are also no requirements under NSPIRE for a fire sprinkler system, just that if you have them, they are free from damage. The thing that's going to dictate your fire sprinkler requirements is going to be code. So if you have a building that's over 75 feet tall, long-term care facilities, or if it's over 5,000 square feet, that's typically when you need to have a fire sprinkler. We're going to look at the fire sprinkler to make sure that there's no obstruction, no foreign material, missing escutcheon rings, and that the concealed sprinkler head covers are not glued or caulked to the ceiling. Exit signs and auxiliary lighting are installed typically in common areas, and it's to allow people to find the exit or egress route in an emergency. So we want to make sure that they are fully intact and functional. They're firmly mounted and in good condition, that you can read the word exit, legible and visible, adequately illuminated. And if you have a combination exit sign and auxiliary light, then those are actually going to be recorded as two separate deficiencies. Okay, that's our fire safety. Anybody have any questions on fire safety? All right. Well, in our kitchens and bathrooms, then all of our units have to have an area to prepare, store, including cold storage, and cook food. Units also have to have at least one working toilet and one working shower that can be used in private. Countertops will be inspected for wear and tear. That could be indicated by swelling, delamination, scratches, cuts, burns, peeling, or missing laminate. And we also want to make sure that it is properly secured to the wall or the base cabinetry. Sinks should be inspected by turning on the hot and cold water, using the sprayer or stopper if you have one, and then check to make sure there are no gaps between the wall and the sink where water could get behind there. Our cabinets, we're going to visually assess our cabinets, open all the doors and drawers, calculate the number of missing or damaged doors, drawers, and shelves, and then divide it by the total amount of the components. If it is 50% or more, that is when you would have a deficiency. If it is less than 50%, then you will not have a deficiency on your hands. Refrigerators should have all elements intact. They should be functional, free of damage, and the freezer and refrigerator must maintain the proper temperature. That is going to be between 32 and 40 degrees for the refrigerator, and a freezer should be less than 32 degrees. Now, do not inspect medical refrigerators or freezers, resident-owned freezers, or any stored appliances that are not in use. For our stoves, we do have to have a primary cooking device in the unit. So all of our burners, broilers, and bake elements should be operational. If you have electric burners, then they should fully light around the entire ring of the burner. If you have a gas range, then all of the flames should equally light around the burner. Ovens should be heated to 350 degrees and then tested with a temperature testing device. You can put that little silver guy right there on one of the racks, turn it to 350 and walk away, or you can use the temperature gun. All units are required to have at least one functioning toilet. And under NSPIRE, then HUD has said a toilet with a broken or cracked seat is considered to be not functioning. So not the lid, but the seat itself. It's also a requirement that toilets can be used in private. So what that means is that we are going to have to make sure that there are no holes in our door that penetrate all the way through, that the doors can close all the way, because they do have to be able to be used in private. And that goes for our tub and shower as well. You have to have at least one functioning shower or tub, unless it's an SRO, that's a single residence occupancy. If you have a tub stopper, pop-up assembly, you're going to engage that, turn the water on for about 30 to 45 seconds, let it fill the basin, make sure that it holds, and then let it out to make sure that it drains properly. Also check the faucets to make sure there are no leaks that are around that faucet. When it comes to lighting and electrical, they're going to be looking at your electrical panels, and they need to always be accessible. You might call these service panels, breaker boxes. It's that main box where all of the electricity runs into. If they are obstructed, whether on the interior, exterior, or in the dwelling unit, then that is a deficiency. The only exception on that is if it is inside the dwelling unit and you have, like, let's say the tenant put a picture over it or something because they thought it was ugly, then that's very easily taken off. And so that's okay if they do that. But if they have a bunch of stuff piled up and you're not able to get to the electrical panel, that's considered obstructed. Any damage to the breakers or fuses, such as rust or corrosion, or melted parts, burns, arcing, or smoke damage. Our outlets, we want to make sure that they don't present a shock hazard. So all conductors should be enclosed and properly insulated. We're going to check for damaged sheathing, an open port, a missing knockout, a missing outlet or switch cover, a missing breaker or fuse, a missing light bulb. It's okay if the light bulb was burnt out, but if it's completely missing, then now we have an open electric source. Any opening or gap that is present, if it is greater than 1/2 inch, is going to be a deficiency. And all of our habitable rooms have to have either 2 outlets or 1 outlet and 1 permanently installed light fixture. They also need to have GFCIs when required. GFCI stands for ground fault circuit interrupter. AFCI is an arc fault circuit interrupter. And they're also going to be looking to make sure that your outlets are properly wired and properly grounded. That's why those little testers come in handy, because we see a lot of GFCIs that kind of look like this, where there's the little button where you can test and you can reset it. But some of the newer ones, they're actually built into the wiring, into the circuit themselves, or it might be actually at the breaker box. And so you want to make sure that you are able to test those still. All outlets that are within 6 feet of a water source or a damp area must have a GFCI or AFCI protection, unless they are installed under a sink or countertop in an enclosed cabinet. Then that's not a requirement. And also if it is designated for only a major appliance, such as a water heater, refrigerator, washing machine, dishwasher, or disposal. Regardless of their distance from the water source, then those should not be evaluated under that. But it does have to be a designated outlet that is only for that appliance. Now, under this definition, then all of our outlets that are on the exterior of the unit are always going to be within 6 feet of a water source. It's, the sky. And so if you have exterior outlets, all of those have to be GFCI protected as well. On our doors and windows, we're going to look at our garage doors to make sure that there are no penetrating holes and that the door can completely close and completely open. If it has an electronic motor, it should work, but an electronic motor is not required. Our general doors would be our passage doors, so non-fire rated, non-entry doors on the interior of the building. And on the outside, they're called exterior doors. We're going to inspect those to make sure that they are not damaged, inoperable, or missing components. Our entry doors are going to have a little bit stricter guidelines because there is a presumption of privacy or security between the locations. So we're going to look at the physical condition of the door, the frame, the surface, looking for holes, gaps, and other physical damage that could impact the door's integrity. And we're also going to look at the hardware to make sure that it functions as intended and these doors can be secured. Windows are going to be inspected to make sure that they have proper weather stripping or seals, no damage to panes, sash, framing, casing, or the screens. Now, they're not going to look at condensation. So if you've got condensation on the window, you don't have to replace the entire window. It is not going to be evaluated. In the final NSPIRE standards notice, it says that a screen will be considered a component of the window and will be cited if it's damaged, missing, or not functionally adequate. However, there is some discussion that HUD might not consider a screen to be part of an inspectable item. I have not had anybody from HUD tell me that. And so until somebody from HUD tells me that, I'm going to give you the information as it's presented in the final regs. All right, mechanical, we're going to look at our plumbing, make sure that there's no water leaks, any kind of swelling or moisture, deteriorating components, cracks or failed glazing, leaks in your plumbing system, and then mold, mildew, or peeling paint or wallpaper. So those are all indications that there could be a leak that is coming from that source. And I think if anybody has ever experienced a water leak before, you know how damaging those things can be. If there's any gas or oil leak, whether it's gas, propane, oil, from an uncapped gas or fuel supply line, that can expose those tenants to dangerous gases that could result in death. So that is an immediate health and safety issue. One of the new standards that came from HOTMA, that's the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act, it has directed HUD to set a minimum temperature standard, and that came out with PIH Notice 2018-19. That says that between October 1st and March 31st, a unit has to have heating that can maintain a temperature of at least 68 degrees. HUD may include some exceptions for tropical climates, but if you are not in a tropical climate, then this will apply. And I want to note on there that there is no temperature requirement for air conditioning. This is only for heaters. So there's not necessarily one that's associated with that, but if you have air conditioning, it does have to be functioning. We're also going to look at our clothes dryers, whether you provide them or the tenant has to bring their own. We still want to make sure that the systems are all properly functioning. So we're going to look at mainly the dryer exhaust system. That is the vent outlet that exhausts the air from the dryer blower to a designated area, typically outside. It is intended to remove combustion gases like carbon monoxide, heated air, moisture, and lint from the dryer to a designated area. So these are things that can actually cause fires if they are not properly maintained. So we want to make sure that these are clear and not going to be a fire hazard. Water tanks are also something that can cause major damage. If you guys have ever seen anything on TV or on YouTube, these things, if they are not properly installed or don't have a proper pressure relief valve, then they can actually turn into just little tiny rockets. And so we want to make sure that they have a pressure relief valve and an extension pipe that extends to be within 2 and 6 inches of the floor or the pan that it's sitting in. It has to be comprised of proper material. The exhaust should have a continuous upward slope so that gases don't get trapped. And there should not be any holes, disconnected pieces, or misalignments along the flue piping that could potentially release dangerous gases into the air. Now, hazardous conditions. There's a lot of things that are considered to be hazardous conditions. The first is lead-based paint. This only applies to housing that was built prior to 1978, and NSPIRE does not replace any of HUD's lead-safe housing rules. So it's still going to be the same rule. These are just some signs of lead paint. If you've got mold and moisture issues, there's a comprehensive approach for NSPIRE, and it's based on the levels of observed conditions, ventilation, and dehumidification requirements for your bathrooms. Most mold-like substance conditions are going to be considered life-threatening unless they are very small. You will use a moisture meter, and you have the option, if you determine that there is elevated moisture levels in the unit, then you can use that infrared camera as well. Blocked egress. This is something that I think probably a lot of us have gotten written up on at some point in our careers. It's when somebody is not able to exit a room there should be two locations. The first is usually the door. The second is usually another door or a window. And so that's considered to be blocked egress if there are not two ways that somebody can exit a room. Our unit doors cannot have double keyed locks. That's a lock where you have to have a key to open it from both sides. Also cannot have any padlocks. That includes our interior doors. So if a tenant has a padlock on a door, they can't have that. You have full permission to cut that off. Any exit doors cannot require a key, tool, or special knowledge or effort to open from the egress side. They should be able to open and close and be completely free of obstruction. If it's a window, it has to be able to fully open. Now, the good news is tenant-owned property is no longer going to be evaluated. So if you have previously been written up on an inspection because your tenant had a dresser or a TV or a bunk bed in front of a window, that will no longer be the case. Tenant-owned property is no longer evaluated. Now, if you have a permanently installed window-mounted air conditioner, it will be cited, but if it is a tenant-owned temporary air conditioner, you will not be cited on that. Infestation rules under NSPIRE are based on objective deficiency criteria. They actually only call out specifically 4 different pests. It's cockroaches, bed bugs, mice, and rats. Any other kind of pest like bees or ants, fruit flies, or mammals like squirrels, gophers, bats, birds, those will just be kind of cited into like a lumped in category of other pests. If they have poor housekeeping or improper storage, that should have no bearing on whether or not this deficiency is cited. So people can have an infestation even though their house looks like it's very clean. And also people who have less than great poor housekeeping, it does not necessarily mean that they have an infestation. So we're only going to cite it if we actually see any kind of pests in the home. And it is even if you have an extermination contract, so like, somebody comes out monthly to spray, then it's still a deficiency. They are looking for evidence of pests, and that means live or dead pests, feces, eggs, chew holes, nests, or odors. If you have a trap in the home and there's a pest in that trap, it will be cited, but just having a trap with no pests in there is not going to be cited. Please do not remove any bedding, search through any of the tenant's personal items to look for these things. It's just in your normal walkthrough if you see one. These are signs of rat or mouse infestations in the home if you are not familiar with it. Obviously, we see their droppings, gnawing, tracks, scratching, nests, and usually there's a foul odor. If your tenants have hazardous materials that they are storing, they do have to be stored appropriately. So easily combustible items like paper, plastic, and clothing should never be stored within 3 feet of a heat appliance or a fuel burning water heater. And then a combustible item like hairspray, nail polish remover, butane lighter fluid, those things should be stored appropriately, and again, not within 3 feet of a heat appliance or fuel burning heater. Gasoline, kerosene, or propane should never be stored in a unit. Even if it's not near an ignition source, it should always be stored outside of the unit as long as it is in like a storage facility that is only accessible outside of the building. Sharp edges refers to any component or item on a property, either interior, exterior, or the dwelling unit that has a sharp edge that can cause physical damage. It could be broken glass. It could be a tile that has an exposed edge, a damaged handrail. I've seen equipment on playgrounds that have sharp edges. That's obviously a big one. So anything that can puncture or cut is going to be a deficiency. All right, handrails and guardrails. There are some new requirements when it comes to handrails and guardrails. A handrail is something that is used on stairs, and they are required if you have 4 or more risers in a set of stairs. Also, a handrail might be needed for a ramp that is longer than 6 feet or has a rise of 6 inches or greater. On the stairs, the handrail can be on either side. It can be on both sides. It can be up the middle as long as there's clearance. There's not any specific requirement on that. However, ramps do have a specific requirement. They have to have a handrail on both sides, even if it's up against a wall, and it does have to be graspable. HUD has determined that a 2x4 board does not fit the standard of graspable. And so if you have any ramps that have handrails that are made out of 2x4s, you are going to have to cut those down, sand them down to where they are graspable. The handrails themselves should be at between 28 and 42 inches tall. And then guardrails are required on raised walking surfaces where there's a drop of 30 inches or more. And all guardrails have to be at least 30 inches in height as well. All of our handrails and guardrails should be able to withstand at least 200 pounds of pressure. There are ways that, like, there's weights that you can use to determine if they do meet that requirement. Flooring, walls, and ceilings will also be inspected. We're going to look at flooring, the substrate, and any coverings like tile, vinyl, or carpet. If there's loose or unfixed coverings like an area rug, then that is not inspectable. You are allowed to have unfinished concrete floors in garages, storage rooms, basements, and maintenance and mechanical rooms. However, you are not allowed to have those in living areas unless they are painted or polished. We're going to look at stairs as well to evaluate their condition and general safety. We're looking at the stringer, the nosing, and the tread to make sure that there is no damage that could potentially cause somebody to fall. And then on our site and grounds, we're going to be looking at litter. This is a big one. And I really like what they've done with this one because now instead of just saying, oh, you've got a piece of trash laying around, then they're only going to cite you if you have 10 or more items in a 100 square foot area. So that's a pretty, decent sized area. 10 items is a lot. So if you have just 1 or 2 pieces of trash there, you're not going to be written up on that. If you've got more than that, you're going to want to make sure that you're getting those cleaned up. Also, if you have any large discarded items like furniture, appliances, or large garbage, and it has been disposed of improperly, then you would have a deficiency for that. However, if it is not disposed of, it's just sitting out there and it's being used, then that is not a deficiency. We're going to look at trip hazards on the interior and the exterior. These are abrupt changes in vertical elevation or horizontal separation on a normal walking path. Again, we've got a measurable amount that has been added to NSPIRE. A vertical difference of 3/4 of an inch or more, or 2 inches or more of horizontal separation are considered to be trip hazards. If there's an engineered design gap or vertical difference, like a raised manhole or a water meter box, that will not be considered a trip hazard. All of our buildings do have to have addresses on them. That's so that emergency services can very easily identify the location. It needs to be visible. It needs to be legible. And that includes things like building entrances, roadway entrances, monument signs, anything that indicates the property, the name of the street, or the address of the dwelling unit. Make sure that it is not damaged or broken, that it is not obscured by vegetation or another object, and that it is legible and can be seen from the street. Again, we kind of talked about this earlier, but our fences are only going to be inspected if it's a security perimeter. If it is just a fence that's going in somebody's backyard, then it's not going to be impacted. And we're only going to be cited if the fence has a section that impacts 20% or more of that section. Our roads, driveways, and parking lots will be evaluated to make sure that there are no obstructions, damage, or potholes. Potholes are only going to be written up if you've got one that is 4 inches deep and 1 square foot wide. Anything that is an obstruction that is intended, that's a temporary kind of block, like construction cones, those won't be written up. But things like down trees or large holes will be. All right, and then our structural is our last section. This is when they're looking at the actual structure of the building. This could be things like the basement, crawl spaces, load-bearing devices, anything that is a part of the structure of the building. So we're looking at a foundation to make sure that there are no cracks, spalling, damage to the girders, if it's in poor condition, or there's evidence of water infiltration or ponding. That all indicates that there's an issue with the foundation and needs to be addressed immediately. Our walls, we're going to look at the interior and the exterior walls, make sure that they are not missing any sections, that there's no holes that penetrate all the way through, and any peeling paint that exceeds 10 square feet will be noted. We're only going to look at retaining walls if they are more than 24 inches in height to see if they are leaning away from the fill side. It does not include raised garden beds. And then our roofing, gutters, and chimney, we're only going to observe these from the ground. We're not going to use ladders to climb onto the roof to inspect. We're looking for debris that limits the ability of the water to drain. 25 square feet or more of ponding, damaged gutter components, exposed roofing substrate, unintentional penetrative holes or intentional penetrative holes that don't have a screen on them, and then damage to the roof assembly, soffits, eaves, fascia, or deck. So that is the 1-hour course on NSPIRE. That covers just a very, very small amount of what's NSPIRE entails. But like I said, if you would like a more in-depth class, then we do those trainings. We'll have probably 3 or 4 of them throughout the year next year. And I'm also available to come out on site so that we can go through it in more detail. I've got lots of great pictures that are examples of these deficiencies, and it goes into each and every deficiency that is listed in the entire HUD NSPIRE inspection protocol. So I thank you guys very much for being here. I hope you guys all had a wonderful holiday and that you have a nice new year. Everybody be safe. I'll stick around for a little bit. So if you guys have questions, then I'm happy to help. But otherwise, thank you guys. Hi, Genevieve.
Thank you so much for such a great presentation, Crystal, especially bringing in the new year, a lot more informed, always great. Folks, I have put the link to the webinar feedback survey for you in the chat. If you don't mind taking a minute or two to do that. They are anonymous, so you don't have to worry about your email or your name being connected to it. Some of you had let me know in the chat that you were experiencing audio issues, and I'm going to make sure I send y'all the link to the recording tomorrow once it generates. So if that was you, please just include your email for me in the chat if you didn't already say something. If you already said something and we discussed it in the chat, then I already have your name down. But we hope you can join us for our next webinar. This will be in 2026 on January 6th on energy, workforce development, and capacity building with Mike Stevenson and Stephanie Bostwick. It'll occur at the same time that today's webinar did. And we encourage you to check out our recorded webinars. There is a whole Catheta webinar archive playlist on our YouTube channel. It goes back about 2 years. And that's a free resource for you to use on YouTube. So I encourage you to check out the archives, see the different trainings we have on there. And then YouTube does have the capability to auto-generate closed captions, as Crystal had mentioned earlier. Whereas, unfortunately, the learning platform we have is fantastic, but it is newer. So it is still, developing and gaining some of those features. And unfortunately, right now, generating closed captions is just not one of them. But we can have the recordings have closed captions. So I encourage you to check out that resource. Please also check out our other upcoming training events. We post about them all the time on our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you're somebody who enjoys listening to podcasts, we have an in-house produced podcast, the Hope Thing, a Native American podcast. You can listen to that wherever you listen to your podcasts, or if you like to watch the interviews with our special guests, you can find that on our YouTube channel as well. There is another playlist for that. But otherwise, that is all we have for you today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in for the webinar. On behalf of the Native Learning Center, Happy New Year. We can't wait to have another year of learning with you in 2026. And thank you again, Crystal, so much for an incredible presentation. Sorry to anybody who had audio issues. I did follow up with tech support, and I shared the error code that I was given in the chat. So they're going to look into it. They said, unfortunately, it might be weather issues on the attendees' end, but they are going to look into it. And then again, if that was you, if you were somebody who was having audio and we didn't already check in the chat together, please just let me know your name or let me know in the chat. And that way I can email you the link to the recording tomorrow. But otherwise, that's all we have for you today, folks. Please, I encourage you to do the webinar feedback survey. And otherwise, have a restful and wonderful rest of your week and your new year. Thanks.